Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Shannon Jackson. I'm a senior employment and training consultant with the Georgia Department of Labor. Also joining us today is Joel Dominic Jr. He's going to be kind of our driver today, and I'm going to do a lot of the talking, but he's going to chime in from time to time as well. He's got a pretty extensive background with Employ Georgia, and it's probably pretty safe to say he knows some bells and some whistles and some tricks about EG that even I don't know. So he's going to make sure we don't miss anything important today. Just a couple of things before we get started. We made a couple of assumptions about where your knowledge level is already as far as Employ Georgia is concerned. And I just want you to know that if we assumed incorrectly, we will have time to go back and show you a couple of other things that we felt like we could probably skip over. I think most of you that have DWG related job openings in your local areas have already created your hiring manager accounts in Employ Georgia, and you've already posted your jobs. So we're making the assumption that we can pretty much skip over the account creation piece. But if any of you haven't done that yet and you feel like you could benefit from that, just let us know. And we'll certainly, work in some time today to show you how to do that. It's not a real lengthy process. It's pretty easy, but we will be happy to walk you through it. I do see someone saying I definitely need to create an account. So we'll definitely do that. Joel, do you think we should do that at the beginning, or do you think maybe we can do that kind of toward the end?
We can go ahead and get it out of the way.
Okay, all right. So we'll start there. We'll give you we'll give you a few tips, a few pointers, give you a little advice on how to actually create that hiring manager account, and then we'll move directly into creating a job posting. Now, we'll offer you some guidance that we would offer any employer who might be posting a job in EG, but we'll also talk about some things that are probably more specific to these particular jobs and some things that you'll definitely want to do to make sure this process works as smoothly as possible. So I think we will start there. Joel, if you want to go ahead and share your screen with everybody. You may have heard me mention earlier, this may not go a full 2 hours. It's really just going to depend on how many questions you have, but we will certainly stick around for the entire 2 hours if we need to get all your questions answered. So step number one, before you can post a job in Employ Georgia, you have to have what's called a hiring manager account. Now, let me share this with you because this is a little confusing to some people about Employ Georgia. Each individual who wishes to post jobs and search for candidates and perhaps send invitations to candidates to apply for your job needs to have their own Employ Georgia account. So in other words, what I'm saying is when you create an Employ Georgia account, that account belongs to the individual that created it. It does not belong to the company or the business or the organization. So say, for example, there are 3 people in your local area that are charged with the responsibility of posting jobs. Each of you will need to have your own separate Employ Georgia account. And the unique identifier for those accounts will be your email address. Now, if all 3 of you create accounts, you will be linked together so you can see one another's job postings and manage one another's job postings if you like, by virtue of the fact that you will have the same FEIN number. And that will kind of link you together. But it's very important to remember that each individual who wants to use Employ Georgia to post jobs needs to have their own separate account. Okay. All right. So the first thing you do to create an Employ Georgia hiring manager account is you'll notice there's a button in the lower right corner that says register. So you simply click there, and this is going to move you through the registration process. So first of all, you'll enter whatever email address you would like to use to be the unique identifier for your account. Now, I think in most cases, you'll probably want to use your work email address. It'll ask you to enter that twice. Then, of course, it's going to ask you to create a password. And just make sure you follow the instructions that are displayed there on the screen. You want to make it as airtight as possible. Now, you will have to have your organization's FEIN. If you don't know it, contact someone that will have that information. You probably have that information at hand, but that is absolutely mandatory. You cannot create your Employ Georgia account without that FEIN. But again, remember, if you have more than one person in your organization that needs to create an account, you're going to be linked by that shared FEIN, and you will be able to share your postings with one another. You can duplicate them if you need to. You can even give one another permission to kind of manage those postings if you'd like. Now, it's going to ask you to set up 3 security questions. You might want to jot down the questions and answers in a safe, secure location. In the event that you need to contact Employ Georgia support for help, if you're having difficulty getting back into your account, and that does happen, you'll need to be able to answer these security questions. JJ, remind me, I believe the answers to the security questions are case sensitive. Is that correct?
That is correct. They are.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind. Now, your username, the email address, it's not case sensitive. So you can type that in any way you'd like. But if you ever need to use these answers to your security questions, they are going to be case sensitive. So that's page number 1. And then you'll simply click next step.
And just as an FYI, when you're creating the account, it doesn't say username. So as Shannon mentioned, just know that your username is your email address.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, JJ. Okay, so next, the first field is employer legal name. Now that is probably going to be the name that's on your paperwork, so to speak. And then where it says employer name, that's just the name that people generally know you by. Oftentimes they will be the same. You will notice as you move through this process, certain fields will have a little orange asterisk by them. Those are the fields that are mandatory. You have to answer those questions. Any fields that don't have the asterisk are not mandatory. You can answer them, you cannot answer them, just whatever you'd like. I think most of these fields are self-explanatory. URL is one of those fields that's not mandatory, but if you do want to include information about your website, that's always a good idea. Phone number, generally speaking, you'll probably want to include your main phone number, and you can provide alternate numbers if you feel like that would be helpful. State employer ID, that is not a required field, so don't knock yourself out trying to track that number down. As long as we've got that FEIN, we're good. On ownership type, this is simply where you indicate, whether your business is privately owned or whether it's government, whether it's nonprofit. Industry classification, this is a mandatory field. Now, you'll notice what JJ is doing there is he is simply typing in an industry to seeing if a potential match may come up. You will also notice to the right there's a link for what's called NAICS Lookup Use 2012. You can also click there and do a search to identify the industry in which your business best fits. On account type, you just simply indicate whether you're a direct employer. If you're a staffing agency, obviously you would select that option. Okay, employer description. Let's talk about this for just a moment. Some employers get really confused here and they think we are asking for a job description. That's not what we need here. First of all, this is an optional field. If you don't want to include this information, you don't have to. But this does give you the option to tell job seekers a little bit about the nature of your business, your history, what you do, what your product is, or your service. What will happen is whenever you post a job, this information will pull into that job posting into the employer description. So you don't have to include it, but if you'd like, you can. JJ's giving us an example here.
And Shannon, we do have a couple of questions
Okay.
that came in.
Go ahead.
The first one was actually in the chat. So it says account type doesn't have an asterisk. Is it a mandatory field?
You know, that's interesting. I believe it probably is. JJ, do you know differently?
Yeah, it's not.
It's not a mandatory field.
It's not a mandatory field. Yeah.
Okay, great. But, you know, if you don't mind, include that information. Thank you, JJ.
Okay. And then the second question came from WorkSource Cobb. For a WorkSource center, what should be the, I'm assuming the industry code, or does it matter? I guess.
Well, it does matter. Let's go ahead and maybe look that up and just give you an idea of what you should probably use.
They would probably be more. What do you think, Shannon?
Could be employment services. Could be.
You can go with, we'll just say other general government support. That would be a good one to use.
Okay.
And just another FYI, when you're in this field, just know that as you're typing, whenever you're typing, and if nothing displays in the drop down, then that means that whatever you enter will not be accepted. So as you're typing, just make sure that something displays down here at the bottom and you're able to select one of these options.
Yeah, and just remember, you can also use that lookup link to the right if that's not working so well for you. I think somebody was just asking whether this will be available in hard copy form, this presentation, and no, it will not. This is a live demo, not a PowerPoint presentation, but I believe Robin just chimed in and said this is being recorded. So I'm guessing it's going to be available for you to watch after the fact if you need to go back and review it. Okay. Any more questions about this particular page in the account registration process?
Yeah, Donna asked if her FEIN, if I did not know my FEIN, will I not be able to move forward? And the answer to that is no, you will not be able to move forward without an FEIN.
Yeah, that is absolutely mandatory. So just that information should be fairly readily available. Just make sure you have that standing by when you get ready to create the account. Let me point at the bottom too. There is at the very bottom of the page, there is a link for terms and conditions for employers. You will be asked at the end of the process to ensure that you've reviewed that and you'll have to agree to it. I know most of us just kind of say, yeah, we looked at it and we just check it and we keep going, but do make sure that you take just a few moments to review that before you finish creating your account. And again, there's also information in the bottom about privacy. If you need help, and there's a contact us link. We have an Employee Georgia support team that's generally available between 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock every day, Monday through Friday. So anytime you have an issue with Employee Georgia, whether it's a technical issue or you just have a question about using Employee Georgia, that contact information is going to be there and you can always reach out to them. So this is where you can fill out an email form. Sometimes you can actually get a response more quickly if you just send them an email as opposed to trying to call, but the phone number is there. So, you know, jot that down if you'd like, and you're welcome to ring them up if you're having any kind of issue. I think the most common issue is I forgot my password. So just give them a buzz if you need them. So then we click and go to the next step. And this is where you include your information. I am the individual that is registering this account. So this is where we need to know who you are. So I think first name and last name is pretty self-explanatory. Your title, the title is a mandatory field. you'll see it pulls in some of that information from the previous page. A lot of the fields on this page are optional. And then you can actually go to the next step. And this is where the terms of use are displayed. Again, take a moment to review it. Now, we've been harping on our Employ Georgia folks forever to make this I accept these terms of use box a little more prominent. If you look down in the left-hand corner, it's really, really, really small, but make sure you check that box after you've reviewed the terms of use, and then click where it says complete registration. And boom, you'll get a message saying, hey, you're done. And it will give you Employ Georgia Support's contact information just in case you need them. So that's pretty simple and easy, right? So I think the main thing to remember is make sure you got your FEIN before you start. And again, just keep in mind that you are creating this account for your use only. This is not for your whole organization's use. If there are other people within your organization that also need to register, they will need to create their own accounts. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions about the registration process? All right. Sounds like no. Okay, so at this point, you're actually ready to post a job. So from here, if you look in the upper right corner of the page, there's a link that says post a job. You can click there. Also, you'll see the option on the left-hand side of the page. So whichever works for you. Okay, now let me show you, the job posting consists of several tabs. If you look toward the top, you'll see kind of a series of tabs with arrows. The first section is title and employer. We're going to talk about a couple of features on this page that are especially important if you're going to get good, accurate job matches, because one of the things Employ Georgia will do for you is it will recommend matches to you. And how good those matches will be is highly dependent on the job title that you enter and whether you match that well to the what we call the ONET category that corresponds with your job title. Then there's going to be the description section. We'll talk about that in just a moment. This is also really, really critical to ensure that you get good matches, and we'll talk about some do's and don'ts there. Then we'll talk about the requirements section, which is also really key. Even if you have jobs that don't have a lot of really stringent minimum requirements, if you do this part the right way, it'll really help you narrow things down and get the best qualified candidates. Then we'll talk about details. This is really important because I think for so many of you, you have openings in different locations, and you're going to want to make sure that you create postings for each of those locations to ensure that the right people see those postings. And there's a really easy way to do that if you know how. Then salary and benefits, and then we'll talk about recruitment information, which is also really important to make sure that you're funneling all candidates first through the Department of Labor to make sure that we can screen out candidates who don't at least meet the minimum qualifications before we kind of move them on to you for that additional screening piece that you need to do. So let's start with the job title. So first thing you'll do is you will literally enter here what we call the employer job title, which really just means whatever you call the job, that's what you'll enter here. Now, we do discourage you from entering a lot of kind of extraneous or additional information in the job title field, which really is not about the job title. JJ and I see job postings all the time from employers who they load all sorts of details into the job title. And the actual title or nature of the work gets lost a little bit. They'll put, this is a first shift, temporary, part-time, no experience needed material handler job. Well, what we just really need is material handler. There's room to put all that other stuff elsewhere in the job posting. So just kind of keep it clean if you can. So for example, here, you'll see that JJ entered the job title Baker. Now, the next step you'll want to do is click where it says find. And what will happen is it's going to offer you 5 options that might be a good match for the employer job title that you entered. Now, you'll also see below that, it'll say, or select from the following. So the first thing we recommend that you do is check these first 5 options and see if there truly is a good match. And this is why that's important. When you select one of these 5 options, this is what the artificial intelligence in Employ Georgia is going to use to go out there and look at candidates that are already registered, job seekers that are already registered in our active database. And this is how they'll notify those people, hey, listen, the South Georgia Regional Commission just posted this new job for a baker. It looks like based on your Employ Georgia resume, you got experience as a baker. We think you might be a good match for this job. Here's the details. Go in and look at this job. And if you're interested, please follow the instructions to apply. So that's why getting a good match is so important. So review the 5 recommendations. If there is a pretty close match here for you, select the one that's going to match, and then you're going to get some good recommendations from the AI in Employ Georgia. Now, sometimes you won't necessarily see a really good match here. So you have this second option. The first thing you'll do is in the first drop down, these are the what is it, 23, I think, JJ, very kind of broad ONET categories.
That is correct.
So what you'll do is first you'll locate the very broad ONET category that you feel like is the best match for your job title. It might be, yeah, say, we'll just say construction and extraction, or actually like maybe food preparation. Let's do, yeah. Okay, and then you'll select the second drop down and select the job title that is you think is the closest match. Now, I will tell you something about ONET. You will not always find a perfect match. Some of you may remember the days of DOT codes, which were followed, of course, by ONET. Because the job market changes so quickly, and with technology, new jobs are literally being invented almost every single day. Sometimes these occupational categories can't really keep up. So sometimes the best that you can do is simply selecting a match that's close, but it won't always be perfect. So just keep that in mind. And again, whatever you select here will help the AI in Employ Georgia notify candidates that, hey, here's a job you might be good for. Here's the details. Why don't you apply? Now, in this case, it looks like with the job title baker, you've got a really, really good match in your first 5. So in this particular case, we'll just go with that. So it's either or. You don't do both. You do either the top or the bottom.
And let me just add a little trick in it. If you know that your job title, the name of the job title is kind of, I'll say, different from what the actual job is. For example, we had a manufacturing company and they had a position that was called a principal. Well, if you enter principal in the job title field, it's going to bring you something back in the education field. However, the position was more of like a manufacturing production supervisor. So if you had to just put in, say, production supervisor and select fine, you would get a better match within these categories because it's looking based off the words that you enter here. And once you select an option, you can always go back and change the job title to whatever it actually is or what it's called by your company.
Yeah, we can get some terrible mismatches sometimes. We have large employers who are federal contractors. They tend to use third parties to post their jobs in Employ Georgia, and it's done through an automated process. And they'll just upload 100 jobs at one time. Nobody's literally going back and then looking at them to look at this match and make sure it's good. And they may upload a job for a nuclear engineer, and because of the way they entered the job title, it may give them a list of daycare workers, because they didn't go back and make any adjustments. So I can't explain how critical this piece is to making sure that the system will recommend some good matches for you. Now, in the employer information, the employer name will pull over from your account, so that part's kind of taken care of. You will notice that you do have the option to check the confidential box so that the name of your organization or your business will not display to job seekers. I don't know if in this particular case that's what you want to do. I'll leave that up to you to decide. The majority of employers kind of want to put their name out there, but there are some cases where they kind of want to keep it, on the sly a little bit. There are even cases where maybe they're planning on replacing someone that already works for them, and they want to go ahead and put a job out there to see if they can't find that replacement, and they don't necessarily want that person to know what they're doing. But that is an option for you. And if you remember when we created the account a moment ago, you do have the option to include an employer description. If you want that to actually display on the job posting, this is where you would indicate that. Again, though, I can't emphasize enough, we don't want you to put the actual job description here. This would simply be a description of your organization or of your company. We see that all the time. We see employers putting a job description here. You also have the option to upload and include your logo on your job postings. And for some employers, that branding is very important, and you will have the option to do that too. All right, so then you save and move to the next step. You'll notice as we navigate through, you'll always see these save and move to the next step options. You're going to want to make sure that you move through that path at the top where you see the arrows. You're going to want to make sure that you go all the way through to the end to ensure that your posting goes up. Now, when you get to the description, you have two options here. The first one is I have a job description. Maybe you've got something that you want to copy and paste. Or if you don't have a job description at all, there is a job description builder in Employ Georgia that you can use to help build that description. Now, I think in most of your cases, you're already going to have a job description, so you're probably going to use option number 1. So JJ is going to click there. All right, and it simply says, type or paste your job description here. If you got that saved in a Word document or something like that, you can simply copy and paste it and drop it in right here. If you are copying and pasting something, say, off of a web page, just make sure you check that really closely. Sometimes there can be some odd characters or some kind of HTML coding in the background. And if you drop it in here, sometimes it can cause some problems with moving to the next page. So just be aware of that. JJ, would you agree that if you're going to copy and paste it from something, it's probably best to copy and paste it from a Word document?
Yes.
How about a PDF? Would that be okay? Or
yeah, that would be fine. And if it's coming from a web page, I have found that what it does is if, for example, I was doing it this morning, it'll remove some of the funny font and the special characters. Right. But if you want like spacing and things of that nature, you'll definitely have to go back in and make sure that you add that. But I would say a Word document is probably going to be best if you have that option.
Great. Okay, thanks, JJ. Okay, so let's talk about the job description, because this is really, really critical for us to be able to screen candidates and for you to be able to get the right candidates. Just please make sure that you do include a thorough, detailed job description in this section. We see a lot of job postings where employers will either not include a job description at all. They'll tell us all about the history of their company and their EEOC policies and their benefits, but they actually won't provide a job description at all. So provide as much detail as you can about what the individual will actually do on a day-to-day basis. Now, sometimes just a sentence or two is plenty. If you feel like that does the job. Sometimes it might be several paragraphs. Whatever it takes for you to give a candidate a really good idea of what they'll be doing on a day-to-day basis, The more you can tell us, the better. But at the very minimum, we do need a basic description of what their duties and what their responsibilities are going to be on a day-to-day basis. Now, in your case, we think it's also going to be a really, really good idea to include some kind of statement in the job description indicating that, if you're determined to meet all the minimum job requirements, there is another level of screening related to whether you're going to be eligible under the dislocated worker guidelines or not. So some of you, I think, have probably been including this information in your postings. Some of you maybe not, but we think it is a really good idea to tell the candidate up front, listen, once we've determined that you're eligible based on your prior experience, training, and education, there will be this other level of screening that we'll have to put you through, that these jobs are related to a dislocated worker grant. And those are things that we'll cover with you at a later date. So I would seriously consider adding a little statement like that in the description, just as a means of full disclosure, and just so everybody will know there's this additional step that you may have to get walked through later. A few other things to keep in mind about the description. These are things that we frequently see, and we want to discourage you from including here. In the job description field, focus on primarily the job description and the job duties. We don't want you to get real involved here in talking about the minimum qualifications as far as, say, prior experience, prior education, skills, things of that nature, because you're going to see on the next page, that's where you include that information. So the focus here really should be on the job description itself and what the person will actually be doing. Your statement about this being related to a dislocated worker grant and the eligibility process for that. We also want you to avoid providing any kind of contact information like your phone number, your email address, or any kind of application link or URL. If you include that information here, that allows the candidate to basically back out at this point and apply without having gone through the entire screening process. So just keep that in mind and make sure you don't include any of that information here. We're going to show you where to include that later. Now, you are welcome, if you'd like. You can include information here about your organization, your EEOC policy. One thing we're really encouraging employers to do right now, because we've got so many people that are afraid to step back into the workforce because of COVID and the possibility of being exposed to COVID or perhaps exposing a family member that they care for. We are encouraging all employers right now to talk about the things that you are doing in your workplace to keep people safe and keep people healthy. If you've got someone who's a little hesitant to maybe go back to work, if they see that you're doing a good job of that and they're a good match, they might be more willing to apply for your job and throw their hat in the ring. So please include that information too. So any questions about the job description? First of all, make sure you do have a description. It can be a couple of sentences or several paragraphs, whatever it takes, just to give the candidate a good idea of what they'll be doing. Make sure you do include that statement about these jobs being connected to that dislocated worker grant and that there is an eligibility process. Do not include any kind of contact or application information here. Save that for later. JJ, am I forgetting anything as far as the description is concerned?
Not that I can think of right now.
Okay. There's one thing I would like to add, Shannon, sure. And this, kind of goes without saying for a lot of the folks in this group. But when you have a job descriptions, try to make it easy to read for the individual. There are going to be a lot of job postings that they're looking at. Chances are that moment when they're in Employ Georgia, or they're looking at jobs in general. So something that's easy for them to read, whether it be bullet points quickly. Sometimes when we get job descriptions from companies or organizations, they're very paragraph heavy and hard to read. Right. But the rule of thumb I always recommend is if it's something that a participant walking through your door would be able to understand and read quickly, then it's probably good to post online.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Thank you.
And that's also why I kind of stuck those asterisks in there and kind of separated the different fields. It also makes it easier on us Georgia Department of Labor staff as well when we're screening the job postings.
It sure, yeah. The federal contractors that I talked about a moment ago, since they use third parties and they tend to, scrape websites and just kind of dump them in, they're a disaster. I mean, our team literally has to spend way more time than they should, literally just kind of going through them and removing weird characters and separating words that run together and paragraphs that run together and crazy punctuation. And it's just, it takes our team a tremendous amount of time just cleaning things like that up. If you can make them clean from the outset, that helps us both. Any other questions about the descriptions section? All right, I think we're maybe good to move on to the requirements section. You'll notice JJ is clicking save draft and move to next step. You'll want to do that. And you'll notice at the top too, we're kind of starting to move through these tabs. So the goal obviously is to get all the way through the recruitment information. And then that's where you will get the option to actually post the job and put it up. Okay. So this section is really important because this is where you will include information about minimum education, whether a background check might be required, whether that's a credit check or a criminal background check. Is there a minimum age? Are there experience requirements, skills requirements? So let's walk through that briefly. So the first thing you've got to determine is, are there any minimum requirements for the jobs that we're posting? I know in looking at some of them, there aren't a lot necessarily. It may be no more than, well, they have to be at least 18 years of age, perhaps because of the nature of the work they're doing. Say, for example, if it's kind of a custodial or janitorial job where you're going into a school and you're cleaning surfaces because of COVID and you're using chemicals. It may be necessary because of child labor laws that the person be at least 18 years of age. You may require that maybe they have some prior experience doing that kind of work, or you may require that they have at least a high school diploma or GED. But I think the first thing you've got to determine is, are there any real minimum requirements here that we need to include? So let's say, for example, under degree level, you'll see the option to enter minimum education. In this case, JJ is indicating that a high school diploma or equivalent is required. And he's also checking the box where it says, add this requirement to my job description. So people will see it, or you have the option not to check that there, just whichever you prefer.
Yeah, and the only reason why I deselected it was because I know that I already have it over there on that page. But gotcha. In most cases, it's best to not have it in the description and just to have it over here on this page.
Yeah. And JJ, do you want to tell them about kind of how this creates what we call knockout questions?
Yeah. So basically, anything that you select on this page, excluding the background check requirements, what will happen is when a job seeker indicates that they're interested in this job, they'll read the job description and there's an option that says apply for this job. Once they click it, a window will pop up, a little pop-up window, and it will, anything that's marked yes or anything that you indicated you're looking for on this page, it'll ask them, okay, do you have a high school diploma? And they have to indicate yes or no. It'll ask them, do you have at least 1 year experience? If you put it there, they'll have to answer that question yes or no. And if they indicate no, it will not allow them to proceed to apply to the job.
So it's a form of self-screening, and we do rely on the candidate to be honest, but it can help a little bit. So that's why these knockout questions are so important. JJ, let's scroll back to the top and I'll just walk them through each field. So you guys can decide, which fields might be relevant to the jobs that you're posting. So again, the first, that degree level section, that's if there is a minimum education requirement. You'll also see that JJ checked the option, only show application information to people who affirm they meet this criteria. So you have that option too. Now, the next section is background check, and you can just simply select yes or no here if you're going to require a background check and or a criminal background check for the jobs that you're posting. There's no right or wrong answer for those, obviously. You just check the ones that are relevant. On minimum experience, if there is some kind of minimum experience requirement, this is where you would include that information, and this will generate one of those knockout questions when the candidate asks for a referral. Let me point something out here in this field that I think a lot of employers find really confusing, and this is another thing we've asked them to maybe change. You'll notice under minimum experiences, experience in years, and then there's a section right next to that that says months. The layout of that is really confusing for a lot of employers. So let me just make sure you understand it. If there's going to be, let's say if it requires a year of experience or 2 years of experience or 5 years of experience, you will simply use that first box and you'll just enter the number of years that are required. However, if the job requires maybe just 6 months of prior experience, you'll leave the experience in years box blank and then go to the months box and select the number of months of experience that's required. A lot of employers misread that and think they're supposed to, their job requires 5 years of experience. So in the experience in years box, they'll put 60, thinking they're supposed to put it in months. And what they're actually saying is they have to have 60 years of experience, which is clearly a mistake. So if it's years, use the first box. If it's less than a year, use that second box. Okay. And again, you do have the option to indicate that you only want this information to be shown to people who affirm they meet this criteria. Okay. Next is minimum age. Minimum age should be left blank unless there, I'm sorry, did we skip over minimum experience? Let's go to that. Okay, no, okay. All right, minimum age. So this field should be left blank unless there is a legal or statutory reason for that person having to be a certain age. For example, the job that we talked about a moment ago, if you've got a janitorial job where they're going to be working with certain hazardous chemicals or cleaning products, you can probably mandate that they be at least 18, but you do have to show what the work-connected reason is, and you'll see the options there. If you select other, there's a free-form text box where you have to say what that other reason is. The main thing you have to keep in mind here is you can't put an age just because it's a personal preference. We have employers who'll put, well, I don't want anybody under 30 because I want someone who's mature. Well, you know, that's your choice, obviously, but that's not a legal or statutory reason. But there are certain jobs that a person of a certain age cannot do, you know, because of either a state law or a federal law. So that should be left blank, again, unless there is that legal or statutory reason. Okay. And again, this will generate a knockout question. That person will have to attest to the fact that they meet that minimum age requirement. Again, if the job requires a driver's license, you can indicate the requirement here. I know a lot of employers are concerned about people being able to get to and from work, and sometimes they will include a driver's license requirement for that reason. But unless the individual is really driving as part of the job, we would discourage you from including that requirement here. Okay. You'll also see a section for occupational licenses. If there's a certain type of occupational license that's going to be required, you can include that information here, and that will also generate a knockout question. So the candidate has to self-attest to meeting that occupational requirement. Same thing goes for certifications. Say, for example, maybe a forklift certification if it's a warehouse job. That will also generate the knockout question. If there's a language requirement, you may have certain jobs where it would really be beneficial for the person to speak both English and Spanish, for example. And if that's actually a requirement, make sure you select the languages field.
Let me add this real quick, Shannon.
Okay.
Once you enter a certification type or a license type, make sure you select the add option. You'll notice that it will display to the right, so you can add more than one. And if you ever put something in by accident or misspell something, you can always just select the X, and that will get rid of it.
Great, thank you. And I think you have similar options for languages too, correct, JJ?
It's a little different with you just put in the language type, but
Gotcha.
you can select the different proficiencies.
Okay.
So yes, it is similar.
Okay. And then of course, you'll see the option for the National Career Readiness Certificates. And if this is going to be a requirement for any of your jobs, this is where you can generate a knockout question about that requirement and which level is required. Then in special requirements, this is where you can enter any other mandatory requirements that aren't otherwise addressed on this page. Okay, you do want to make sure you don't repeat yourself here. You don't have to mention something that you already mentioned maybe in the job description or further up on this page. But if there are any other specific requirements that are really critical to success in that job, you will include those here. And again, this will generate knockout questions for that candidate to answer. Are there any other questions about this particular page before we move on to the next step? Question, is there where you could add age minimum due to grant requirements? You would do that in the minimum age field. Yeah, and then you would select other and you would say federal grant requirement. That is considered statutory, so to speak. It's a good question. Yeah, it's important, use the field that's provided for the, the right special requirement. That last field would be for, it could even be something like, must be able to lift 50 pounds on a continuous basis if that's really key to the job. Of course, you do want to say with or without reasonable accommodations in that case. So we're not discriminating against a uniquely able job seeker that might be able to use an accommodation to do that kind of work.
And Shannon, one question related to dislocated workers. Obviously, to participate in this grant, you have to have been laid off or impacted by a layoff with COVID-19. Is that something that can be built in this part, or is there a later part where they could do that?
If you put that information here, it will create a knockout question for the candidate, and they may not understand what that means. Okay. So I would just include that information in the job description. And then once we have screened the candidate and determined they at least meet all the minimum job requirements, that's where you guys can kind of pick them up and go, okay, there's this one other thing we have to walk you through to make sure that you're going to be eligible. JJ and I talked about that yesterday, and then we realized, well, if that creates that knockout question, that might confuse the job seeker. So we think it's better left in the description and not there. It's a good question. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Someone also asked, what would you enter if the years of experience is 17 months? Because you're only allowed to put it in age, my recommendation is to put it down here in the special requirements section.
And what was that question again, JJ?
What would you enter if the years of experience, if the years of experience was 17 months. So if the years of experience is 17 months, you would just put 1 year and 5 months.
In 5 months.
So you put 1 year and 5 months there, and that would give you 17. 12 plus 5.
Have to do a little math there. And we've been talking to our Employer Georgia support team about making some changes to this field because it's a little confusing. And like I said, I see job postings all the time where the employer will put 48 years of experience is required, and we know they meant 48 months. And I'll usually just change it for them, but we definitely need to do some work there. Any other questions about this particular tab of the job posting? It's very important, as you can see, for creating those knockout questions and making sure candidates understand, listen, if you don't meet these requirements, you probably should just stop here. You're not going to be a good match. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, we'll move to the next tab. Trust me, when you start doing this on a regular basis, it'll go a lot faster. we're going very slow intentionally. All right, so save your draft and move to the next step. All right, work location. Now, this is going to be really important for some of you because I know that some of you may have, let's say you have an opening for let's say a COVID custodial worker. You're going to have that same opening in 10 different locations, depending on how many counties your local area actually serves. So what you're going to want to do here is you're going to want to create each of those 10 locations here. So for example, we're showing the first location here was for, I think, what was it, Griffin, Spalding County? Okay, but you've actually got this same kind of job opening in, let's say, 3 other locations. It's the exact same job, it's just a different work location. So you're going to want to add each of those locations, and JJ is going to show you how to do that. When you click the drop down, click where it says new or multiple locations. And then what you're going to do is you're going to enter the full addresses for each of those additional locations. And I'll tell you why this is going to be a huge time saver for you. Okay, so you just put in the first additional location, and then JJ clicked add. Okay. And then you're going to add, say, your second location. And then JJ's going to click add. And then let's do one more, JJ. So what you're telling us here is this same job that I'm posting, I've actually got openings in 3 different locations. Okay. The reason that's important is when you are done drafting this job posting and you submit it to us, what's going to happen is it's going to automatically break this one request out into 3 separate job postings. And the reason that is important is because job seekers, when they are searching for jobs, they tend to look in specific areas, often near where they live. And by doing it this way, these jobs will be posted specifically in those 3 areas where you have the openings. So if someone is looking in the Fairburn area, they'll see this job. If someone is looking in the Griffin area, they'll see this job. If someone is looking in the Hiram area, they'll see this job. If you didn't post those individual locations, the main location that you posted, only job seekers that are looking in that area will see it. So make sure if you got a position that literally we got the same job in 8 different counties, you're going to want to add all 8 of those locations. That's going to create a separate job posting for each of those locations. So you are reaching those job seekers locally. You don't have to create 8 separate postings yourself. You do it one time, include those locations. The system creates those separate postings for you.
And
hey JJ, I'm going to need you to take over for just a moment if you don't mind. I'm going to mute.
Okay. There's also an option that says all currently listed locations. Now, I highly recommend not using this option. And the reason why is because what it does is it lists every job location that was entered by your company. So that means that you could have someone, they could have entered in 65 Mockingbird Lane and spelled it LN versus LANE. Then that means you would have 2 different jobs for the same location in there. So I highly recommend try to stay away from this because it can create more problems than it's worth. But if you do use it, just make sure that you go in and look at all of the locations that they're referring to. And if there are any duplicates, just make sure that you delete them. Now, no fixed location. That just basically means that would be a position. For example, you may have a construction worker or some type of job where people are going from place to place and they're not located in one specific area. And then of course you have your option down here where it says suitable for home-based job seekers. And if you select that, that just basically lets the system know that, hey, this job is for someone that wants to work from home. Pretty self-explanatory. Next, we have our job conditions. And under the job conditions, you have court-ordered affirmative action. You guys won't even have to worry about that. Those are just for any time that there was an issue with discrimination for a specific company. And within that company, they may have received a lawsuit, and then they were told by the government that, hey, you have to make sure that you are not discriminating, and they have to go through this whole process. But that's what they select. And next, we have our federal contractor options that would apply if your position is a federal contract. And then the other ones are a foreign labor certification, which I'm pretty sure that you all won't be using that. So just to touch on them just real quick, that just basically means those are positions when you're bringing someone in from another country. All right, so next section is if you want to indicate just basically, I want to say kind of like what industry that your job is in. There's different options that you can select. If you're questioning what any of them mean and what they mean, you can always select the question mark, and that question mark will let you know what those options are. And that's about it for the most part for this section. But again, this is not mandatory. If you want to use it, you can. Are you back, Shannon?
I'm back.
Okay.
I had to handle a little emergency call from the boss there. All right, so now we're almost there. We're on the salary and benefits tab. The salary range is pretty self-explanatory. Whatever the job is actually paying, whether you have a set amount or whether there is a range. If it's the set amount, you will just enter the hourly, weekly, monthly, yearly figure in that second box. If there is a range, say if it's going to be from $13 to $15 an hour, you'll enter the lower end of the range in the first box and then the top end of the range at the second box. This is important. Where it says select frequency, make sure you select the right pay increment in that box. JJ is going to show you an example, because we do see mismatches sometimes. So in this case, it'll be hourly. It is required that you check the box that says, I confirm that this job posting meets the state minimum wage requirement. Keep in mind, the state minimum wage requirement in Georgia is actually lower than the federal minimum wage requirement. And you have some other options there if you want to actually hide that information from job seekers, or if there's other income conditions there that that you want to talk about.
Shannon, did you touch on the actual amount?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. If you want to provide information about the work hours, I think some of the jobs that you're offering, or maybe even a lot of them, are part-time. So if you've got specific information about the days of the week they'd have to be available, and again, if you want to indicate that maybe this is a part-time, I know most of these roles are also going to be temporary. You have the option at the bottom or in the hours section to provide that information as well. Again, it is optional, but we find the more you can tell people, I think especially if it's a part-time role and or a temporary role, it's good to let people know that up front. If that's not going to work for them, they can eliminate themselves from consideration right up front there. And then of course there is a benefits section. That's really, really important to a lot of people these days. So if you have a job that offers good benefits, include that information. For some people, that's just as important, if not more important than the compensation. And then once you're done with that page, again, you'll see the option to save draft and move to the next step. All right. In the recruitment information tab, you get to indicate when you want this job, how long you want this job to stay up. Now, You can put it up for 1 day. The max is 180 days. So if it were me, probably what I would do if I were you, I would go ahead and put it up for the max 180 days, because you always have the option of going in and changing that at a later date. If you fill all of your positions, you can go in and close these postings whenever you're ready. So what you don't want to do is put maybe 30 days and then kind of forget at that point that that job's about to expire and you still have jobs you've not filled, and then have that job automatically close on you. But again, the maximum is 180 days. You can leave it open for as long as 6 months. But that really is up to you. Number of openings is pretty self-explanatory. Just however many you think you have, just enter that number there. Now, in this section, I think this is really, really important. And we do have a couple of recommendations here for you. This determines how you are going to receive candidates, how you will know that someone wants to apply for your job. So my first suggestion here is you will notice that you're given several different options to receive qualified candidates, and you can check all that you prefer. But I have found that employers can get really, really confused if they check several different options as to how candidates can apply, because it becomes hard to really keep up with everybody. Okay, so my recommendation here, and JJ, chime in if you agree or disagree. My recommendation here would be to funnel all candidates through one application method. That way, you know that everyone who's applied and has thrown their name in the hat, so to speak, for one of these jobs, you're receiving them all the same way. So the first option is you can receive candidates solely through your Employ Georgia, what we call your Focus Talent account. And we'll tell you what that means in a moment. But basically what that means is that all of these candidates are going to come through your Employ Georgia account, and you're going to have to know how to log into that account and look at your applicants tab and review those candidates to decide whether you want to move them along to the next step. And we'll look at that in just a moment. You also have the option to just have the candidate email you a copy of their resume to a specific email address. Now, for a lot of you, that might be your preference, okay? Because if you have received a resume through that particular email address, that this person has tossed their name in the ring as a candidate. So we have a lot of employers that prefer that method. Again, I would just recommend, if you're going to go that route, maybe have everybody apply that way and don't necessarily select any alternate methods. Now, if you want them to apply online, if you have a website where you'd like them to go and fill out an online application, you provide the URL here. Again, if you're going to do that, I recommend that you select just that option. Do us a favor, though, and test that URL before you submit your job posting to make sure it actually works. And if you're going to provide an application URL, make it as direct as possible. Some employers will provide a URL just to their main page, and then the candidate has to find the job. If you can be more direct than that and actually take them directly to the link where they can apply for the job, that would be great. If you have a preference that they mail their resume to you using snail mail, so to speak, just make sure you include all of the information they need here to get it to you via snail mail. You will see there are also options for them to fax their resume to you. I always laugh in 2021 that any of us are still using fax machines, but it happens. It still happens. So that is an option. You can, if you prefer, you can simply have them call someone to set up an appointment. That's pretty direct if you want to do it that way. Or, as you can see, you can just have them show up. Just tell them to come to this address on these days during these times and just ask to see this person. So that is an option too, and it really is up to you. But I would strongly encourage you to probably pick just the one method that's going to help you keep track of everybody and just go with that one method.
And
we have a question here, Shannon.
Okay.
Someone asked if you have a linked account Are the other users able to review the resumes on a posting that a different user from the same agency entered into the system? And the answer is unfortunately not. However, you can basically look at the job postings and you can what we call duplicate them, meaning you can use them to create a new one. But at this time, that option is not available, but they are working with, we are working with the actual vendor to try to make that option available.
Thank you, JJ.
Mhm. Great question, Ms. Janice.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the screening preferences. This section is really critical to this whole process too. So JJ, if you'll scroll down just a little bit. Okay, in the screening preferences, there is something that we need you to do on all of your job postings. That very first option where it says allow interested job seekers to apply. There's a second option that also says only allow job seekers with a match score. You'll actually see that. That's the next two options. The last option, this is the one that we need you to check in every single case on every single job posting. We need you to check the option that says staff must screen all job seekers before they can apply, because this is what happens. When you check that option, that ensures that anybody out there in internet land that is looking on Employ Georgia and they've seen your job and they think to themselves, I think I'm a good match for that job, I want to apply. When they request a referral to that job and this option has been selected, that request is going to get pushed to a queue that we work. There's a referrals queue that Georgia Department of Labor staff work. Once they land in that queue, our staff are going to review that request to make sure that that candidate at least meets all of the minimum job qualifications before referring them and passing them on to you. Now, it's important to know they are only looking at the minimum job qualifications at this point. The dislocated worker eligibility screening part, that falls completely on you. But what they are looking at is they're going to eliminate anybody at this point that does not meet the minimum job qualifications, okay? We want to make sure that every candidate that requests a referral to one of your jobs kind of goes through our filters first. And the way that you're going to do that is in the screening preferences section, you'll check that last option, staff must screen all job seekers before they can apply.
The other question, Shannon. And this comes from LT Goodwin. And the question is basically, can they screen job postings to prevent people from applying within a certain radius? Meaning, they have a job posting and of course job seekers can go in and they can look and they can search anywhere they want to. But in this particular case, they want to make sure if the person is not within 25 miles of that job, they cannot apply to it.
We realize that's frustrating. We hear that a lot from employers, but unfortunately the answer is no. But there is something that you can do, and we're going to touch on that briefly here in just a little bit, where you can actually go in and screen candidates yourselves, and you can limit the candidates that you see within a certain radius of where the job is located. But no, if a job seeker indicates through their search parameters that they're willing to look at jobs in this particular location, there's no way for us to screen those people out. But now, just because they get through, because they request a referral and we determine, yeah, they do meet the minimum qualifications and we refer them to you. Once you get them, if you look at their Employ Georgia resume and you see that they're 100 miles away, you're under no obligation at that point to follow through. You don't have to call them and invite them in for an interview. You don't have to call them at all at that point. We are simply saying at that point they meet the minimum job qualifications, but it's up to you from this point. So if there's anything about that candidate at that point that you think it just doesn't work for you, and that could be, well, my gosh, we're in Valdosta and they live in Macon. They're not going to drive to Valdosta every day for a temporary part-time job. We don't want to waste any additional time on this candidate. You just skip right over them. So you do have that option always. You're under no obligation at any point once someone has been referred to move them through the process at that point to the next step if you don't feel like they're a good match.
And another option too is to use the special requirements and make sure that it's indicated in your job description.
Yeah, good advice, good advice. Any other questions there? In this last section, veterans priority of service, you do have the option whenever you post a job in Employ Georgia for the first 24 hours, the only job seekers who can see it and the only job seekers who can be referred for the first 24 hours are qualified veterans, okay? That's automatic. That's a requirement of USDOL. You have the option of extending that vet hold longer if you'd like to. You can actually extend it for the entire life of the posting. That's up to you. That's completely up to you. Now, obviously, if you do that for the entire life of the posting, you really are restricting the field of candidates. And I know for a lot of you, it's been tough already finding enough candidates. So you really need to think about whether that's, a wise thing for you to do. We all love to hire as many veterans as we possibly can, but you might really narrow down your potential field of candidates if you do that. But just know that that is an option.
A couple more questions, Shannon.
Sure.
Faye Vincent asks, what does the question mark refer to by the last section?
If you want more info, that's a good question. If you want more information about what this means, you can click there and it'll give you more information about what it means. For example, if you only want candidates that have a certain star match, it'll explain how that works.
And for Tamara Helding, I am in Region 1. We have had people from outside our region submit applications. I have been emailing them information regarding WIO office in their region. Is that okay?
Sounds good to me.
That would be it.
Yeah, and I'll chime in on that one too. Absolutely. If you'd like to send them information on WIOA, also if you'd like to send their resume or contact information to your counterpart in the other local area. And John Lyle and I can help with that too.
Thanks. Any other questions about this last tab in the job posting? Okay, so now I'm sorry, JJ, anything else?
And sometimes people do get this mixed up and they select that option. And just know that if you ever indicate you want to extend it for the life of a posting, that means that if you're looking for somebody other than a veteran, you will not get, they will not have the option to apply to that job. So that's something that a lot of employers commonly mix up. So the best thing to do, I would say, is to just leave that section alone.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Okay, now we've come to the moment of truth. You see the option where it says save and post. This is where you are actually posting your job in Employ Georgia and it's going to become active. So you click the save and post button. All right, you'll get a little preview here. You might just want to scroll through it and make sure it looks okay to you. And if everything looks okay, you'll click the option that says post job. And you will hopefully get a message saying that your job is now active.
Well, not in this case. This one actually went to the queue,
right?
Which means that it has to be reviewed by Georgia Department of Labor staff. And I'll let you touch on that, Shannon.
Okay. Yeah, whenever you post a job in Employ Georgia, and there are a few cases where it won't go to a queue, but in most cases, once you post a job, you'll get a message saying, it's gone to our queue for review. It can take 1 to 2 business days before your posting is actually reviewed and it actually goes up live. So just keep that in mind. We work very hard, though, to get it up as quickly as possible. And the reason we do that is because we just have to make sure that there's nothing in your request that violates Employ Georgia's terms and conditions. as far as job postings are concerned, or there's nothing that violates GDOL's policy and procedures as it relates to job postings. But again, usually it will get reviewed, if not that same business day, before the end of the next business day. I think what JJ is doing now is he's going to go in and try to get all that approved, right, JJ?
Yeah.
And then we kind of want to show you what it might look like in your jobs folder, and just show you a few things that you can do yourself. Yes, we do have a couple of staff people that are specifically assigned to screening your job postings and trying to find qualified candidates and referring them to you. But just in case you want to take a little more control yourself, we want to make sure there's a few things that you can do yourself that will help you find qualified candidates. And once we get this approved, we'll do that for you.
You got to approve the account first.
Yeah. While JJ is working on that, do we have any other questions about anything we've talked about so far?
This is Brandon again. I did, since we are recording this, want to go through, and there were a couple questions that we answered via the Q&A while you all were talking. So just to go through those one more time, so the ones that weren't discussed. There was one question from WorkSource Cobb about the maximum number of accounts one agency can have. There is not a maximum number.
No limit. As far as Employ Georgia is concerned, literally, if you have 50 people that have the responsibility of posting jobs and screening and recruiting, you can have 50 different accounts. And of course, the unique identifier will be that individual's email address.
And it actually looks like we answered all of them already. So yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think JJ is just about done. And then we're going to go into your jobs folder and just show you a few tricks and see if you have any additional questions, and we'll wrap up.
There is one more question that came in. How do you make changes to the job order after it's been posted?
We're going to show you that in just a moment.
All right. Perfect.
Because never fear if you realize as soon as you posted a job that you made a mistake, or you want to add something or change something. It's actually really easy to do. All right, so I think now JJ is going to go back to, okay, so we just kind of want to show you a couple of things. So first, so what you have posted your job. Now remember, when you posted that job, you actually had the same job in 3 different locations. So when you log into your account and look at your jobs folder, you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner here, we clicked on the jobs tab. You'll notice that you actually have 3 active job postings. And again, it's important to remember the reason we do it that way is so job seekers in those specific areas where you actually have the openings will be able to see those jobs and apply if they're qualified and if they're interested. So you'll see the job title for each one is Baker. The name of the company is Pie Tasting Company, and you see the work addresses listed there. You'll see the date that the job was posted and the time and what the expiration dates are on each of those postings. Now, to answer your question about what if you need to change something, okay, let's look at the little icons. And JJ, if you'll kind of just hover over them as we start left to right. The first icon is called the refresh icon. If at any point you want to refresh a job posting and extend the expiration date out another 30 days, you can use that refresh icon to do that. Now you'll notice when you select it, it's going to ask you a few questions about your satisfaction level and what you've experienced so far. If you've got some good answers to those questions, you can provide them. If not, you can just click cancel and you can move forward. Okay, the second icon is close. Let's say you filled that position for the baker in Fairburn and you don't need to receive any additional candidates. All you've got to do is go in and click this close icon, job posting's out of there. Okay, it disappeared, it's gone. Okay, the third icon is hold. If for some reason you don't want to close a job, but you need to put it on hold, maybe your manager says, you know what, we just got an email, we might not be able to fill that position right now. We need some more information though. Let's not close it. Let's just put that job posting in Griffin on hold. Then you click the hold icon. And that job is on hold. Okay, the fourth icon, the little shortcut, the fourth one is duplicate. Okay, let's say, for example, you find out about a new opening, and it's just like this opening, it's just a different location. You basically want to duplicate this job posting and then change a few of the details. So to do that, instead of having to create a brand new posting from scratch, you would click duplicate, and it's going to, it'll ask you if you're sure. And then what you'll do is you just walk through these tabs real quickly just to see if there's anything that you might need to change or update. Now, job description's the same, requirements are the same, the details, pretty much everything's the same, no changes. I just need a new job posting. It will allow you to do that pretty darn quickly, as JJ is showing you right now. And boom, there you go. So that's a real time saver, a real shortcut. Now, of course, that got pushed to the queue, so GDOL staff can review it. Usually when the job posting is in review, it'll be in your draft tab, just so you know. He's going to go in and approve it real quickly. And now you'll see that they're both active. Now, the last shortcut, that's the little pencil icon. This is where you can edit. So if you realize you need to change something, add something, take something out, you simply click on the little pencil. And then you go to whichever tab that you need to make a change or an update to. Let's say you forgot to add the little statement about, you will have to be determined eligible for dislocated worker services, and you want to add that little sentence. Or you decide, you know what, they don't need a high school diploma or GED. I'm going to take that requirement out. And then you will simply click Save and Post after you've made all the changes you want to make. Now, I will tell you this, most of the time when you make an edit or a change, it will push it back to the queue for another review. So try really hard to get it right the first time, because some employers do find it frustrating when maybe they've got a job that they've had up for a week already, and then they go in and make what they feel like is a pretty minor change. It can take another day or two for that to get active again, because we do have to review your changes to make sure you didn't change anything that now makes the job posting in violation of our terms and conditions. It's a little annoying, but it does happen. So just
and there are some instances that you won't experience it, but there are just system defaults that are in place. It just depends on what you select on your job posting that will determine whether it will go to the queue to have to be reviewed. So if you happen not to see it, that just means that you didn't select one of those fields that the Georgia Department of Labor deemed necessary for us to have to review before it's posted.
Yeah. Thank you, JJ. Okay, so let me just show you a couple of other tricks if you want to take a little more command over this process. For example, when you're looking in your active jobs folder, let's look at the one that JJ's got in front of us here for the baker. You see on the far right there where it says View Job. Go ahead and click View Job there. Okay. Now, this just kind of gives you the highlights of your job posting, and you'll see the little icons are also available to you on this page as well. But you see where it says view matches from the database? If you click there, this is where you will see a list of possible matches for your job that Employ Georgia has recommended based on the job title and the job description that you included. Okay. So if you want to start to go in and look yourself at some of these possible matches, you can do that. Now you will notice that it won't necessarily show you the individual's name at this point. It's just going to kind of show you a little bit about their prior work experience. What you can do, though, to learn a little bit more, you'll see the candidate number there. If you click on that number, you will see more of the details on their resume. Now, you will notice you still don't see their name or their contact information at this point. That's because their privacy, so to speak, is protected until they actually decide to apply for your job and become a candidate or an applicant. But what you can do here is, if after reviewing this information, you feel like this person looks like they might be a pretty good candidate, you can go to this little shortcut up above where you see the little envelope. You can click there, and you can actually send this candidate an email to invite them to apply for your job. Now, it is kind of a canned email. I don't believe they can change anything in this email. Is that correct, JJ?
That is correct.
But basically, you're asking them, hey, it looks like you might be a good match for our job. Here's a link to apply. And then you send them the email.
And let me say this. You can't check that either.
Now, if they choose to apply for your job, they'll kind of get pushed through whatever application process you've set up on your job posting, and they'll go through that process just like anybody else. They also will appear in what we call your applicants tab. So JJ is going to show you the applicants tab. Now, of course, you don't have anybody there yet. Here's the thing to remember about the applicants tab, though. Once they accept your invitation and they apply for the job and they are officially an applicant for your job, when you click on their resume, then you will see all of their contact information. You'll see their name, their phone number, their email address. So if you still feel at that point that they're a good candidate, you can then reach out directly to them and invite them to the next step in the application process. You may have noticed a moment ago when we were looking at the list of possible matches, there was an option to flag candidates. If you saw somebody that, maybe I'd like to go back and look at their resume again a little bit later, you can use that flagged option to flag them, and then you'll find them under your flagged resumes later. If you want to look at them, there's the flag there. Yeah. You'll also see the option, that little kind of talk bubble there. JJ, if you'll hover over that.
What did you say now? The
little talk bubble, the little icons. If you want to make a note about a particular candidate, you have the option to do that. And then the little people icon next to that. If you see a candidate that you really, really like, and you would like to see other candidates very similar to them, you can click that icon and it will recommend some other similar candidates to you. Again, all you're going to see is a candidate number and some limited information about them at that point, but you can send them an invitation to apply. And if they become an applicant, then you can see everything. And you can opt to move them to the next step in the interview process if you would like. Now, keep in mind, our team is doing a lot of this for you already. This is just if you want to kind of do a little extra work yourself to find good candidates. I know it's been a challenge for a lot of you to find enough people to fill these jobs. every employer out there is dealing with that struggle right now. In the invitees tab, this is where you will find a list of people that you have sent an invitation to apply to. Okay, so if you've sent out 10 invitations, you'll see them listed here. JJ?
Just to give you a heads up, if you utilize this feature the same day that you put in the job posting, and if you're trying to send an invitation to an applicant that is not a veteran, you will get a message letting you know that it's not, that person can apply to the job at that time. Just know that email sits in a queue, and after that 24-hour time frame is up, it will go out to that customer.
Right. Good point. Good point. Yeah, it's all about vets the first 24 hours, but you can go ahead and start looking at other candidates and inviting them. But like JJ said, it's going to hold that invitation until that vet hold is released, and then those invitations will go out. I want to show you one more thing. If you look toward the top of that page, there's a little plus sign where it says search options. And this will kind of relate to that question we had a few minutes ago about, can you limit the range of where the job seeker is? We can't limit it on the job seeker side of things. They can search wherever they'd like. But if you are searching for job seekers, you can do that by utilizing some of these search options. And let me just kind of show you how you can generate your own search based on certain criteria, and you can really kind of narrow it down a little bit. So first of all, there's the location options. So let's say your job is in zip code 30308, for example, and you really don't want to see all these candidates that are 50 miles away, 100 miles away. You can generate a list of candidates that are within a certain distance of the work location zip code, or really any zip code that you choose. And Joelle is showing you how that looks there. Also, if you go to the very top, JJ, for me, one thing you can do is you can type in a keyword if you'd like if you were looking for someone maybe that's got janitorial experience, you can type in the word, say, janitor. And then you can indicate whether you want to look for that word in the full resume, and or just in the employer name or in their education. Obviously, I think it's best to just look for the full resume. Okay, then you've got your location indicated. If there's a minimum education requirement, you can indicate, I only want to look for people that have, at least this requirement or better. Okay. If language is a concern, you have that option. Again, if their military status is something that you want to look at, that's an option. Now, the resume matching, this is important to me. You have two options here. You can say, I only want Employ Georgia to give me a list of people who, based on your artificial intelligence, or at least what we call a 3-star match. Or you can say, I just want to see all resumes that meet my search criteria without a star match. I tend to do that one. I just kind of want to see all resumes that have these criteria that I'm selecting. And if you kind of look on the other side, you've got other options there that you can select if you feel like they're relevant. Whether they have a driver's license or a certain certification, you have the option to do that. Once you've selected all the criteria you want to select, you can click the link that says Apply Advanced Search. And that's going to give you a list of candidates, if you scroll down a little bit here, that might be a good match. And remember, we're working in our QA region here, so we don't have a lot of records here. But if you were doing this in Employ Georgia, you'd probably get a lot more matches. And again, you see that you have the same options. You can click on that candidate ID number, take a closer look at their resume. If you think they're a good match, you can invite them to apply, and then you go from there. So that's something that you can do proactively that will help you generate a list of other possible matches that you can reach out to and invite them to apply for your job. What questions do we have about kind of the last couple of pieces that we talked about? After your job's been posted, going into your jobs folder and duplicating or refreshing or closing or putting on hold, making edits, and then also taking advantage of some of these other search features to find candidates on your own. I know it's a lot and it takes a little practice. I think once you just get in there and play around a little bit, it'll make more sense to you. JJ, anything to add? Anything that we missed that's probably really critical for them to know?
If for some reason they wanted to, the save, search, and notify of new talent, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, you can actually, if you want to kind of move your cursor to where they can actually do that. You see the link that he's hovering over, save this search and notify me of new talent. If you click there, you can basically tell Employ Georgia, as new matches come in, notify me via email, and you can give your search a name. You might want to say Baker / Colquitt County, or just whatever name will work for you. Indicate whether you want daily alerts or whether you want weekly alerts. And then, of course, indicate the email address where you want to get those alerts. Now, I will tell you, if you indicate you want daily alerts, you may start getting a lot of emails. So if that's a little more than you want to handle, you might want to think about just doing it weekly, or you might want to think about whether that option is something that you really want to do at all. But it can certainly be a good memory jogger for you. To make sure you're checking regularly to see if you've got some new candidates. Looks like we have a question from Faye about assigning the job code. That popped up briefly. I can't see it now.
Okay, she said if we practice and a job code is assigned, can the job code be reassigned? How far do we go in a practice mode?
Well, when I say practice, I want to make sure I'm clear. I'm saying kind of practice some of these different options and features on actual jobs that you've already posted. So you want to make sure that anything that you're doing is something that you intend to do. But if you're asking if you can go in late, let's say you posted a job and you got to thinking about it, and maybe the occupational category that you assigned to the job is maybe not the best match. Yes, you can go in and select that edit icon and you can change that category if you'd like. Is that kind of what you were asking? Because we do see that from time to time. We realize that there's actually a category that probably is a better match than the one you selected. We can go in and kind of fix that, or you can go in and fix that, and then it will give you a new list of possible matches based on that new ONET category. Faye, does that kind of answer your question? And keep in mind, Employ Georgia's support is available either at the phone number we provided or at the email address we provided. If you're having any trouble figuring that out, or really anything about using Employ Georgia, they can help you with that.
Another thing too, to make sure we touch on the resources. Not sure if you're familiar with these, but if you select resources and go to view tutorials on how to use Employ Georgia, these are some awesome videos, and they walk you through the process of and then they're broken down on how to create an account, how do you create a job posting, and they're very good. So I would definitely recommend, if you're one of those that want to try to figure out on my own type individuals, then this is an option that you want to make sure that you
take. And I think on average they're about 10 to 12 minutes each, and if really mastering Employ Georgia is important to you, and we hope that it is, I mean, you're basically looking at probably about an hour and a half of your time. It's really well worth the time. You will have a much better understanding of Employ Georgia once you've viewed these. And the good news is if you don't remember everything or forget, you can always go back and open up the video again and check it out and remind yourself. So yeah, Rhonda and her team worked really, really hard on these, and they're fantastic. So please take advantage of them.
So we got someone asked, thanks for location radius. This is LP Goodwin. Thanks for location radius search filter. Can you go over again the steps to send resumes to an email?
Yeah, sure. So I think we're talking about in the job posting. Yeah, so in your job posting, if you want all candidates to email their resumes directly to a specific email address, in that recruitment information tab in the job posting, and JJ is going to go straight to that. So yeah, you'll go to the recruitment information tab, and then you'll see that option, email resume to, and then you just simply enter the email address you want it to go to. And every single candidate that has applied and is interested will send their resume directly to that address. I think that's a really good option because if they've gone through all the screening steps and they proactively then send that resume directly to you, they're expressing a sincere interest in that point. I know we're all challenged sometimes with talking with candidates, and when they end up in front of you, you realize this person really hasn't thought about this. They don't seem to be a serious candidate at all, and that's such a huge time waster for everybody. So I think this process can kind of help you figure out who's serious and who's not. Does that answer your question? Again, I would encourage you in that recruitment information section, just pick one method and go with that. Thank you, Donna. What other questions do you have about Employ Georgia, creating an account and posting jobs? Do you feel like if you haven't created your account already, you know how to do that now? That's pretty simple process. The job posting probably seems more complex just because there's so many steps. But again, I think once you've done it a couple, 3 times, it's just really paying attention to the details and thinking about how the job seeker is going to see this. And is it going to reach the people that it needs to reach? And definitely, if you've got job openings in multiple locations, in that work location field, make sure you are adding all those locations. So EG will break those out into separate postings, and you're really reaching the people that you need to reach. JJ, can you think of anything else as we kind of wrap up?
Not off the top of my head.
All right. Any final questions?
We got another question.
Okay.
From Donna Robinson. She said, I'm not sure of all the people on here, but I assume that if we have employers, we can refer them to this site so they can post their jobs on there.
Please do. Yeah, we encourage it. Absolutely. Some employers, especially if they're federal contractors, they are required by law to post their jobs through Employ Georgia. And those employers probably know that already, but we really would love to see more small and medium-sized employers utilize Employ Georgia. They're all having such a hard time right now. I mean, filling all of their positions. And if they use Employ Georgia in the right way, and if they use it proactively, it can make a difference. So please, refer them to EG. And again, if they have any questions or if they have any technical issues, they can also reach out to Employ Georgia support via that email address or via that phone number.
Well, I want to thank you, Shannon and Joelle. Oh, we have one question that came in.
What is my focus talent account? As we were going over that, I think that actually means it would make more sense if it said my Employ Georgia account.
Yeah.
So like that option, that just basically means that you won't have anything emailed to you or any of the other options. That person will just display on your applicant tab.
They're talking about on the recruitment information tab.
Yeah.
like JJ said, if you select that option, that just means that they won't be emailing you a resume or applying online or coming by the office. They're just going to apply via Employ Georgia, and when they apply, their information will land in your applicants tab. And some people really like that, but I recommend that option if you really understand how Employ Georgia works and you are logging into your account every single day and looking at your applicants tab for new candidates. And some of you probably are, I know Amy, down in South Georgia, we were doing that down there. And I think, once you know that process, it's a pretty easy process, but you do need to be really comfortable with EG to use that option. For some of you, it might just be better to have them call you directly or email your resume directly.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for taking, more than an hour and a half out of both of your days, almost 2 hours, to walk us through this. This is an incredibly helpful tool, as I'm learning, and a lot of the folks on the webinar know as well, to engaging some of those job seekers. 2 notes that I did want to add for everyone attending. First, that while we were talking about Employ Georgia as a tool for the dislocated worker grant, this is also a tool that you can use on the other day-to-day operations of your local workforce area. So whether it's business services or working with participants, feel free to take this knowledge and apply it to however you see fit at your local area and your one-stops. And then secondly, related to the dislocated worker grant, this is while we encourage you all to use this tool to recruit dislocated workers for these temporary employment opportunities, continue to utilize some other strategies as well that you have been doing and has been proven successful in engaging job seekers. It's often a multifaceted approach, so we highly recommend that. But with that, there was one question that did come in. Will we be receiving a copy of the webinar? Yes, we'll be sending out the recording as soon as possible. So probably sometime tomorrow or in the coming days, once it's processed and complete, we'll send that to you all. But in the meantime, I want to kind of give a virtual applause to Shannon and Joel for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you all for having us.
Excellent. And so last but not least, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out related to Employ Georgia. Reach out to the contact us parts of the system that we discussed earlier. And you can always contact myself or John Wildmore about this or anything related to the dislocated worker grant. So thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
You all have a great week.